At 35,000 feet, Evelyn Carter, a 72-year-old black woman, sits handcuffed in first class on a flight from Phoenix to Portland, her wrists bruised, her tailored gray suit soaked in soda. Passengers cheer as flight attendant. Tara Hensley smirks, victorious, until the plane lands and Evelyn's son, Nathan Carter, CEO of Horizon Airways, storms the gate. What started as a simple trip became a brutal clash of racial hate, setting off a chain reaction that could destroy lives or rewrite futures. How did one seat ignite this war? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if you stand for justice against all odds, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic showdowns. The sun blazed over Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport on a scorching July afternoon, the asphalt shimmering with heat as travelers shuffled through the terminal, their voices a low hum beneath the roar of jet engines. Evelyn Carter stepped off the shuttle bus with a quiet grace that belied her 72 years, her silver curls tucked neatly beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her cane tapping a steady rhythm against the pavement. She wore a tailored gray suit, its crisp lines hugging her slight frame, a rare indulgence after decades teaching civil rights history at a small college. Her dark eyes gleamed with pride as she clutched her first-class ticket for Horizon Airways Flight 217, bound for Portland, a treat she'd saved for months to enjoy after years of fighting for justice in dusty lecture halls and protest marches. This was her moment, a sliver of luxury earned through grit, and she savored the thought of sipping tea at 35,000 feet, the world far below her for once. She approached Gate B9, the line snaking past a coffee kiosk, where the air smelled of burnt espresso and sweat. Passengers fanned themselves with boarding passes, grumbling about delays, but Evelyn stood tall, her shoulders squared, her cane a silent testament to battles won and lost. She'd flown this route before, knew the drill, expected the usual, nod from the crew as she handed over her ticket. But today something felt off, a prickle at the back of her neck she couldn't shake. The gate agent waved her forward, and she stepped onto the jet bridge, the metal floor cool beneath her polished loafers, her breath steady despite the desert heat pressing through the walls. At the aircraft door, Tara Hensley stood like a sentinel, her 34-year-old frame rigid in a starched Horizon Airways uniform. Her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that stretched her pale skin taut. Her hazel eyes flicked over Evelyn, narrowing as they lingered on her dark complexion, her silver hair, the elegant cut of her suit that screamed money Tara assumed didn't belong. Evelyn offered her boarding pass with a warm smile, the kind she'd perfected over decades as the only black woman in faculty meetings and courtrooms, a shield against the world's sharp edges. Tara snatched the paper, her fingers brushing it with a deliberate slowness that made Evelyn's stomach twist. She glanced at the ticket, then back at Evelyn, her lips curling into a sneer. "You must have stolen this," Tara said, her voice low and biting, dripping with contempt she didn't bother to hide. Evelyn blinked, her smile faltering but not fading. "I beg your pardon?" she replied, her tone calm, measured, the courtroom professor slipping into place. "I booked this ticket months ago. First class, seat 1B. She adjusted her grip on her cane, her knuckles whitening slightly. Tara didn't flinch, didn't check her tablet or the manifest glowing on the podium beside her. She leaned closer, her breath sour with mint gum, and hissed, "Doesn't matter. You don't belong up front. Economy's where you're going." Before Evelyn could protest, Tara pivoted on her heel, her bun swaying like a pendulum, and strode into the plane, barking, "Follow me now." The jet bridge seemed to shrink around Evelyn as she stood frozen, her pulse thudding in her ears. She knew this sting, the cold slap of being told her place, but this was raw, public, a knife twisted in front of strangers. Passengers behind, her shifted, some raising brows, others looking away, their silence louder than words. She took a deep breath, her chest tight, and followed, her cane echoing softly against the narrow walls, her dignity trailing behind her like a shadow. Tara marched her through the cabin, past the plush, wide seats of first class where white faces glanced up from their magazines, their eyes narrowing as if she'd trespassed. The air grew stale as they reached economy, thick with the scent of reheated pretzels and recycled oxygen. Tara stopped at row 32, pointing to a middle seat wedged between a snoring man in a stained polo and a woman wrestling a leaking diaper bag, its contents spilling onto the floor. "Here," Tara snapped, her gaze daring Evelyn to argue. Evelyn stared at the cramped space, the sticky armrests, the puddle of juice pooling beneath the tray table. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice even. "This isn't right. I paid for first class. There were seats up front, I saw them." Tara's smirk widened, thin and mocking. "They're reserved. Sit, or I'll have you dragged off this plane." The threat hung heavy, a smog Evelyn couldn't escape. She glanced around, searching for an ally, but the passengers nearby averted, their eyes one muttering, "She doesn't belong up there anyway." Another, a woman with a pinched face, added, "They'll let anyone buy those seats now." The words cut, sharp and condescending, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She'd faced worse, stared down Klansmen in her youth, and this wouldn't break her. She folded herself into the seat, her knees jamming against the tray, her cane tucked awkwardly. Beside her, her suit brushing the damp mess of the diaper bag, Tara loomed over her, arms crossed, her satisfaction palpable. "Enjoy the flight," she said, her tone dripping with venom, then turned and sauntered back to first class, her heels clicking like a victory march. Evelyn exhaled, her composure, a mask honed by years of resilience. The man beside her snored louder, his elbow jabbing her ribs, while the woman on her right muttered apologies as the diaper bag oozed onto Evelyn's slacks. Around her, whispers swelled, a chorus of contempt. "Can you believe she thought she'd stay up front?" A man 2 rows back scoffed. "Probably used welfare money for that ticket," a woman replied, her voice thick with scorn. Evelyn's fingers gripped her purse, her nails digging into the leather, but she kept her face still, her breathing steady. She'd been through fire before, and Tara Hensley, with her smug grin and petty power, had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The engines rumbled to life, the plane shuddering as it taxied toward the runway. Evelyn slid her hand into her purse, her movements deliberate, her thumb brushing the cool glass of her phone screen. She scrolled to Nathan's name, her son, the one Tara would never suspect, and typed with the precision of a woman who'd spent her life turning slights into strategies. "They moved me. Tara Hensley. Help." She hit send, the message vanishing, into the ether as the aircraft lifted off, the desert shrinking below. Tara glanced back from the galley, catching Evelyn on her phone, and for a split second, her smirk wavered. Then it hardened, dismissive, as if Evelyn were a fly she'd already swatted. She thought this was the end, a clean win, a black woman put back in her place. Evelyn let her believe it, let her bask in that illusion of triumph. The cabin lights dimmed, the hum of ascent vibrating through the seats, but inside, Evelyn's mind raced. She'd faced arrogant deans, biased cops, whispered slurs from polished podiums, but this was different, personal, a theft of something she'd earned. Her suit clung to her thighs, the damp fabric a reminder of Tara's cruelty. But her resolve sharpened with every mile the plane climbed. Tara had no clue who she'd targeted, no hint of the storm brewing in the sleek office towers of Horizon Airways Portland headquarters. Evelyn settled back, her cane resting against her knee, her eyes fixed on the seat ahead. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Tara had lit the match, and Evelyn would make sure it burned her down. The plane cruised at 35,000 feet, slicing through the thin air above the sprawling desert. The sun a distant blaze painting the horizon in streaks of orange and gold. Inside Horizon Airways. Flight 217, the cabin buzzed with the low drone of engines and the restless shuffle of passengers. Evelyn Carter sat wedged in her economy middle seat, row 32, her tailored gray suit now rumpled, its hem brushing the sticky mess of the leaking diaper bag beside her. Her silver curls peeked from beneath her hat, damp with sweat, and her cane rested awkwardly against her thigh, a silent companion in the cramped space. The man to her left snored, his bulk spilling over the armrest, while the woman to her right wrestled a fussy toddler, oblivious to the juice seeping into Evelyn's slacks. She inhaled deeply, the stale air tasting of reheated snacks and disdain, her composure a fortress against the chaos around her. An hour into the flight, thirst gnawed at her throat, dry from the altitude and the sting of Tara Hensley's earlier betrayal. Evelyn pressed the call button above her, its faint chime swallowed by the toddler's wails. Minutes ticked by, each one a small eternity, until Tara appeared at the end of the aisle, her blonde bun glinting under the overhead lights, her uniform pristine despite the hours aloft. She moved with a predator's grace, her hazel eyes scanning the rows until they locked on Evelyn, narrowing into slits of cold amusement. Evelyn raised a hand, her voice polite but firm. "Excuse me, may I have a glass of water?" The request was simple, a lifeline in the suffocating heat of economy. But Tara's lips twitched, curling into a smirk that promised trouble. She sauntered closer, a can of soda clutched in her hand, its aluminum surface beaded with condensation. The passengers nearby fell silent, sensing the shift in the air, their eyes darting between the two women like spectators at a prize fight. Tara stopped beside Evelyn's row, towering over her, and popped the can open with a sharp hiss. "Water?" she said, her tone dripping with mockery, loud enough to carry 3 rows back. "You don't get special treatment back here." Before Evelyn could respond, Tara tilted the can, dumping a flood of fizzy cola over Evelyn's lap, the cold liquid soaking through her suit and pooling on the seat. "Oops, clumsy me," Tara chirped, her voice pitched high and theatrical, a grin splitting her face as the soda splashed onto Evelyn's loafers. Evelyn gasped, the shock of the chill biting into her skin, her hands flying to her lap as the dark stain spread across her thighs. The cabin erupted, a ripple of laughter swelling from the seats around her, passengers craning their necks to gawk. "Guess she's used to messes, right?" Tara added, tossing the empty can onto Evelyn's tray table with a clatter, her words a dagger aimed at Evelyn's dignity. Evelyn's pulse hammered, her fingers trembling as she dabbed at the mess with a crumpled tissue from her purse, but she kept her face still, her eyes locked on Tara. "That was uncalled for," she said, her voice low and steady. The professor's authority cutting through the jeers. "I'd like a towel, please." Tara laughed, a sharp grating sound that echoed off the plastic walls. "A towel? You'll wait your turn, princess." She leaned in, her breath hot against Evelyn's ear, and whispered, "You're used to this kind of treatment, aren't you?" The insult landed like a slap, raw and personal, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She'd faced worse, stood firm against hecklers who'd spat at her during marches, and this wouldn't break her. The man beside her snorted, awake now, and muttered, "She shouldn't even be here." Across the aisle, a woman in a floral blouse nodded, her voice thick with contempt. "They'll let anyone on these flights now, spilling all over us decent folks." The words stung, a chorus of hate wrapping around Evelyn like barbed wire, but she refused to crumble. Her suit clung to her legs, the soda's stickiness a humiliating badge, yet her spine stayed straight, her cane a quiet anchor. Tara stepped, back, arms crossed, her satisfaction radiating like heat from a furnace. She thought she'd won, thought this public shaming would silence Evelyn, keep her small and invisible. The toddler's mother finally looked up, her eyes wide with guilt, but she said nothing, too afraid to challenge the flight attendant's reign. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her purse, her nails biting into the leather, her mind racing for a counter-move. She reached for her phone, the soda dripping from her sleeve as she pulled it free, her thumb hovering over the screen. Nathan's name glowed in her contacts, a beacon in the storm Tara had unleashed. She typed quickly, her words sharp and urgent. "She dumped soda on me. Tara Hensley, this is getting worse." She hit send, the message vanishing into the sky as the plane hummed on, the desert stretching endlessly below. Tara caught the motion from the corner of her eye, her smirk faltering. For a heartbeat before snapping back into place, harder, more defiant. She thought it was nothing, a desperate gesture from a woman she'd already crushed. Evelyn let her believe it, let her revel in the illusion of dominance. The cabin lights flickered as the plane jolted through a pocket of turbulence, the seatbelt sign blinking on with a soft ding. Around her, the laughter faded into murmurs, but the stares lingered, heavy with judgment. "Look at her," thinking she's too good for economy. A man in a trucker hat grumbled 2 rows ahead. "Probably sued her way into that ticket," his wife replied, her tone sour with resentment. Evelyn's chest tightened. the weight of their words pressing against her ribs, but she kept her breathing even, her face a mask of calm she'd worn through decades of battles. The soda seeped deeper into her suit, the fabric ruined, a symbol of Tara's petty cruelty, but Evelyn's resolve burned brighter. She'd endured fire hoses in her youth, faced down men with billy clubs, and this was just another skirmish. Tara strutted back toward first class, her heels striking the floor with a rhythm of triumph, her bun bouncing with each step. She paused, at the curtain, glancing back at Evelyn with a gleam of satisfaction, as if the soda were a crown she'd placed on her own head. Evelyn met her gaze, unflinching, her dark eyes promising a reckoning Tara couldn't yet fathom. The plane steadied, the turbulence easing into a gentle sway, but the air around Evelyn grew heavier, thick with the scent of cola and hostility. She shifted slightly, her cane pressing into her palm, her phone resting on her lap like a loaded gun. Tara had escalated this from a seat dispute to a physical assault, a public spectacle designed to degrade her, and Evelyn knew it wouldn't stop here. She'd seen that look before, the glint of someone drunk on power, and it always led to worse. Her message to Nathan was her first strike, a quiet call to arms, but Tara had no idea who she'd provoked. Evelyn leaned back, the damp seat creaking beneath her, her mind already plotting the next move. This wasn't the end, not even close. Tara had drawn blood, and Evelyn would make sure it cost her everything. The plane hummed steadily at 35,000 feet, cutting through the vast emptiness above the Oregon border, the desert below, giving way to jagged mountains dusted with early snow. Inside, Horizon Airways Flight 217, the air was thick with the mingled scents of soda and recycled oxygen, the cabin lights casting a harsh glow over the rows of passengers. Evelyn Carter sat in row 32, her gray suit sodden and clinging to her thighs, the sticky residue of Tara Hensley's cola assault drying into a crusty stain. Her silver curls hung limp beneath her hat, her cane pressed against her knee, and her dark eyes burned with a quiet fury she kept locked behind a mask of composure. The man beside her dozed again, his snores a rhythmic rasp, while the toddler, to her right, gnawed on a soggy cracker smearing crumbs across the armrest. Evelyn's phone lay in her lap, Nathan's silence a gnawing void after her last desperate text. The sting of the soda lingered, a cold humiliation that seeped into her bones. But Evelyn refused to let it break her. She'd faced worse in her 72 years, stood tall against jeering crowds and sneering officials, and this was just another test. Her throat ached with thirst, her request for water ignored, and the laughter from Tara's stunt still echoed. In her ears, a chorus of contempt from passengers who saw her as less than human. She pressed the call button again, her fingers steady despite the tremble in her hands, the chime a small act of defiance. Tara wouldn't win this easily. Minutes stretched into a taut silence. The plane's hum the only sound until footsteps approached, heavy and reluctant. Mike, the lead attendant, emerged from the galley, a man in his late 40s with a paunch stretching his uniform and a clipboard clutched like a shield. His brown eyes darted nervously, avoiding Evelyn's gaze as he stopped beside her row. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and strained. "What's the problem?" Evelyn straightened, her cane tapping the floor, and met his eyes with the calm authority of a professor facing a room of doubters. "I was dumped with soda an hour ago," she said, her tone even but edged with steel. "I've been denied water, and I paid for first class, not this." She gestured to the cramped seat, the damp fabric, the chaos around her. Mike shifted, his clipboard creaking in his grip, but before he could respond, a voice cut through the aisle. "She's telling the truth." Jamal, a young black man in a hoodie 2 rows ahead, stood up, his phone glinting in his hand. His braids swung as he turned, his brown eyes fierce with resolve. "I've got it on video, the whole thing. You gonna let this slide?" His words hung heavy, a challenge Mike couldn't ignore. Passengers twisted in their seats, some scowling, others curious, as Jamal held up his phone, the screen dark but loaded with proof Tara couldn't erase. Mike swallowed hard, his jaw twitching, and glanced toward first class where Tara lingered behind the curtain, her silhouette sharp against the fabric. "All right," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's a seat up front. Come, with me." Evelyn nodded once, rising with a grace that belied the ache in her joints, her cane a quiet drumbeat as she gathered her purse and followed. The toddler's mother whispered, "Good for you," a flicker of solidarity in the storm. But the man beside her grumbled, "She's just causing trouble." Evelyn ignored him, her loafers squishing faintly with soda as she moved. The walk to first class felt like a gauntlet, economy passengers staring with a mix of envy and disdain, their murmurs a low growl. "They'll let anyone up there now?" a woman in a red scarf hissed. "Probably bullied her way in." A man in a polo added, his voice thick with resentment. Evelyn kept her chin high, her silver curls catching the light, her suit a sodden badge of survival. Mike pulled back the curtain, revealing the plush expanse of first class, its wide seats half empty, the air cool and scented with leather. He gestured to seat 1B, her original spot, and handed her a napkin with a timid nod. "Anything you need, just ask," he said, then retreated, his steps quick and uneasy. Evelyn sank into the leather, the cushion molding to her frame, a stark contrast to the hard plastic of economy. Her cane rested beside her, her purse on her lap, and for a moment, she let herself breathe. A flight attendant, not Tara, brought her a steaming cup of tea, its warmth seeping into her palms as she sipped, the bitter notes grounding her. She'd reclaimed her place, turned Tara's assault into a small victory, and the thought flickered through her mind that she'd won. The passengers up here were quieter, their stares less overt, though a man in a pinstripe suit 2 rows ahead muttered, "They let anyone in now," his wife nodding in silent agreement. Evelyn brushed it off, her focus on the tea, the view, of clouds beyond the window, the illusion of peace settling over her. But Tara wasn't done. She hovered near the galley, her blonde bun tight, her uniform spotless, her hazel eyes burning with a fury she barely concealed. She'd lost this round, forced to watch Evelyn sit where she'd sworn she didn't belong, and the sting of it gnawed at her. She whispered to Mike as he passed, her voice a low hiss. "She won't last up here. Trust me." Mike nodded faintly, his loyalty wavering, but bought with a promise Tara had slipped him earlier, a cut of her next paycheck to back her next move. Evelyn didn't hear it, didn't see the storm brewing behind the curtain, her attention on the tea, the fleeting calm she'd fought for. The plane jolted, a sudden lurch as turbulence gripped the fuselage, the overhead bins rattling like bones. Cups trembled on tray tables, passengers gasped, and the seatbelt sign flared to life with a sharp ping. Evelyn gripped her armrests, her tea sloshing but not spilling, her cane steady against her leg. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm and clipped. "Folks, we've hit some rough air. Stay seated. We'll be through it soon." The cabin steadied, the sway softening, but the air grew heavier, a tension Evelyn couldn't place. She leaned back, her suit still damp, her victory fragile but real, or so she thought. Unseen by Evelyn, Tara seized the moment, her movement swift and silent as the plane rocked. She slipped a slim wallet, lifted from a sleeping passenger, in row 5, into Evelyn's open purse, tucking it beneath the damp tissue and phone. Her fingers were quick, her smirk a fleeting shadow as she retreated to the galley, her plan snapping into place. Evelyn sipped her tea, oblivious, her mind on Nathan, on the landing ahead, believing she'd turned the tide. The passengers around, her settled, their glares softening into indifference, and for a heartbeat she felt safe. But Tara's whisper to Mike echoed in the stillness, a promise of worse to come. Evelyn had won a battle, but the war was about to explode, and she didn't even know it yet. The plane soared at 35,000 feet, slicing through the thinning air as the rugged Oregon landscape unfurled below, its peaks glinting faintly under a fading sun. Inside Horizon Airways Flight 217, the first-class cabin hummed, with a deceptive calm, the soft clink of glassware mingling with the low thrum of engines. Evelyn Carter sat in seat 1B, her reclaimed throne, the leather cool against her damp gray suit, the soda stains now a stiff, dark blotch across her lap. Her silver curls framed her face like a halo. Her cane rested beside her, and a half-empty cup of tea sat on her tray. its steam curling upward in delicate wisps. She exhaled slowly, her dark eyes fixed on the window, the clouds a fleeting distraction from the ordeal she'd endured. For a moment, she believed she'd wrested control back from Tara Hensley, her dignity restored, her place secured. But the air held a charge she couldn't name, a storm brewing just beyond her sight. 30 minutes from Portland, the plane settled after the turbulence, the seatbelt sign blinking off with a soft chime. Passengers stretched, their murmurs a dull buzz, but in the galley, Tara moved like a shadow, her blonde bun taut, her uniform crisp despite the hours aloft. Her hazel eyes glinted with a venom she'd nursed since Evelyn's move to first class, a loss she refused to swallow. She'd planted the wallet during the jolt, a sleek black leather prize stolen from a dozing businessman in row 5, now nestled in Evelyn's purse beneath a soggy tissue and her phone. Her smirk was a razor's edge as she emerged, her steps deliberate, her voice cutting through the cabin's hush. "Excuse me, folks," she announced, loud and sharp. "We've got a problem up here." Evelyn turned, her tea trembling in her hand, as Tara strode toward her, holding the wallet, aloft like a trophy. "This was found in her bag," Tara said, pointing at Evelyn, her tone dripping with false concern. "It belongs to Mr. Grayson in row 5. She stole it." The cabin erupted, gasps ricocheting off the walls, passengers twisting in their seats to stare. The man in the pinstripe suit 2 rows ahead shot up, his face flushed. "That's mine. I knew she didn't belong here." His wife clutched her pearls, nodding furiously. "Check her purse again. Who knows what else she's got?" Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs, her voice rising firm and clear. "I didn't take anything. That's not mine." Tara's grin widened, a predator savoring the kill. "Oh, I saw it fall out when you adjusted your bag," she lied, her words smooth as silk, her eyes daring Evelyn to fight back. "We can't. Ignore this." The lie was brazen, seamless, and the passengers swallowed it whole. Evelyn reached for her purse, her fingers brushing the leather, but before she could open it, the captain's voice boomed over the intercom, cold and final. "We've identified a thief in first class. For everyone's safety, we'll handle this upon landing." The words hit like a gavel, silencing Evelyn's protest, the cabin's mood shifting from curiosity to outrage. Mike, the lead attendant, appeared beside Tara, his clipboard trembling in his hands, his loyalty bought with the promise of cash she'd whispered earlier. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, "we need your cooperation." He produced a pair of zip ties, their plastic edges glinting under the lights, and Evelyn's stomach sank. "This is absurd," she said, her tone steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. "I've done nothing wrong." But Mike didn't meet her eyes, his hands moving mechanically as he bound her wrists, the ties biting into her skin, cutting through the thin flesh until a faint red bloomed beneath them. She winced, the pain sharp and immediate, but kept her face still, refusing to give Tara the satisfaction of a cry. The passengers cheered, a twisted celebration breaking out around her. "Finally!" a woman in a silk blouse shouted, clapping her hands. "Get her out of here!" a man in a golf shirt added, raising his glass in a mock toast. Evelyn sat motionless, her wrists throbbing, the zip ties a cruel shackle against her dignity. Tara stepped back, arms crossed, her smirk a beacon of triumph, as she watched the scene unfold. "Should have stayed in economy," she muttered, loud enough for Evelyn to hear, her voice a venomous thread weaving through the applause. Evelyn's purse lay open on her lap, the planted wallet glaring up, at her a lie she couldn't disprove, not yet. Across the aisle, Jamal, the young man from economy, slipped his phone from his pocket, his braids swaying as he angled it discreetly. He'd followed Evelyn's move to first class, his seat swapped with a sympathetic passenger, and now he filmed Tara's glee. The zip ties, the crowd's frenzy, his lens capturing what words couldn't. Evelyn didn't see him, her focus locked on Tara, her mind racing. She'd texted Nathan, he'd be waiting at the gate, and this nightmare would end when they landed. She clung to that hope, her wrists aching, her suit a ruin, believing her son's power would unravel Tara's trap. But Tara's grin told a different story, one Evelyn couldn't read. Not yet. The plane descended, the engines whining as Portland's skyline loomed closer, the cabin lights dimming for landing. Passengers whispered, their excitement a fever pitch. She thought she could steal and get away with it. The pinstripe man sneered. Typical, his wife added, her voice thick with contempt. Evelyn's chest tightened, the weight of their hate pressing down, but she kept her breathing even, her dark eyes fixed on the seat ahead. She'd faced setups before, seen lies twist truth in courtrooms and backrooms, but this was personal, a blade aimed at her soul. Tara lingered nearby, her posture relaxed, her victory seemingly complete. She thought she'd buried Evelyn, turned her triumph into ash, and the zip ties were her crown. Evelyn sat still, the pain in her wrists a steady pulse, her mind a storm of strategy. She'd survived Tara's soda assault, forced her way back to first class, and now this, a frame-up she hadn't seen coming. Nathan would fix this, she told. Herself. His CEO badge a shield against this madness. But Tara's smirk held a secret. A plan deeper than Evelyn could fathom. And the landing wouldn't be the end, only the beginning of something worse. The plane's wheels kissed the tarmac, a jolt shuddering through the cabin, and Evelyn braced herself, her cane a silent vow beside her. Tara had drawn blood again, and Evelyn's fight was far from over. Hey folks, what do you think? Comment, with a 1 if you're raging at Tara's disgusting setup, or a 2 if you believe Evelyn's got the strength to turn this around. Has justice ever felt this far out of reach for you? Hit that like button if this twist has you hooked, and subscribe to catch every brutal blow and epic comeback. Will Evelyn's son be her savior, or has Tara just locked her in a cage she can't escape? What's brewing behind that smirk? This part delivers the 4th major climax, the theft frame-up, as outlined, flipping Evelyn's victory into a brutal reversal with Tara's cunning lie. It's packed with tension, visceral detail, and Evelyn's resilience, setting up the mob chaos in part 6. The call to action fits the story's emotional stakes, and the teaser question primes viewers for the next escalation. Let me know if you're ready for part 6, or if you want any tweaks. The plane jolted to a stop at Portland International Airport's Gate C7, the tires screeching against the rain-slicked tarmac, the cabin lights flickering as the engines wind down to a low growl. Outside, the Oregon dusk painted the sky, a bruised purple, the terminal's neon glow cutting through the drizzle. Inside Horizon Airways Flight 217, first class buzzed with a fevered energy, the air thick with the scent of champagne and sweat. Evelyn Carter sat in seat 1B, her wrists raw and red beneath the zip ties, the plastic cutting deeper with each breath. Her gray suit a sodden ruin from Tara Hensley's soda assault, and the planted wallet still glaring from her open purse. Her silver curls clung to her forehead, her cane rested against her knee, and her dark eyes burned with a quiet defiance she refused to let falter, even as the passengers' cheers from the theft frame-up echoed in her ears. The cabin door hissed, open, a cold draft sweeping in, and the passengers surged to their feet, their voices rising into a chant. "Thief! Thief!" they bellowed, a wave of hate crashing over Evelyn, their faces twisted with a glee she'd seen before in history books and old newsreels. Tara stood near the galley, her blonde bun glinting under the lights, her uniform pristine, her hazel eyes alight with triumph. She egged them on, her voice slicing through the clamor. "She's dangerous, folks! Attacked me mid-flight, stole from you all!" The lie was bold, a spark tossed into dry grass, and the crowd ignited. The man in the pinstripe suit pounded, his armrest shouting, "Get her out!" His wife clapped, her pearls bouncing with each nod. "She's a disgrace," a woman in a silk blouse added, her tone shrill with contempt. Evelyn's chest tightened, the zip ties a vice around her wrists, but she kept her face still, her breathing steady. She'd faced mobs before, stood firm against shouts and shoves in her youth, and this wouldn't break her. She glanced at her phone, tucked beneath the wallet in her purse, Nathan's silence a weight she couldn't shake. He'd be at the gate, she told herself, his CEO power a lifeline to pull her from this nightmare. But Tara's smirk widened, her hands on her hips as she leaned toward Mike, the lead attendant, whispering something Evelyn couldn't hear. Mike nodded, his clipboard clutched tight, his loyalty cemented by Tara's bribe, a deal struck in the galley's shadows. The jet bridge clanked into place, and the passengers surged forward, their chants growing louder, a rhythmic pulse of fury. Tara stepped into the aisle, her heels striking the floor like a drumbeat, and raised her voice again. "She's violent. Officers will handle her." The words carried beyond the plane, a signal to the airport police waiting at the gate. Evelyn's heart pounded, her mind racing. But before she could speak, a figure stormed aboard, his navy suit sharp against the chaos, his dark eyes blazing with rage. Nathan Carter, 42, CEO of Horizon Airways, pushed past the exiting crowd, his security badge flashing in his hand. "Let her go now!" he roared, his voice a thunderclap that silenced the chance for a heartbeat. Tara froze, her smirk faltering, her hazel eyes widening as Nathan reached Evelyn. He knelt beside her, his fingers fumbling with the zip ties, his breath ragged. "Mom, I'm here. This ends now." He sliced the plastic with a pocket knife, the ties snapping free, and Evelyn gasped softly, rubbing her wrists, the angry red marks a testament to Tara's cruelty. The passengers hesitated, their cheers faltering, but Tara recovered fast, her voice rising with a new lie. "Officers, detain her. She assaulted me, threatened everyone." She pointed at Evelyn, her tone frantic, her bun bouncing as she gestured, wildly. Nathan stood, towering over her, his jaw clenched. "That's a lie, and I'll sue you into the ground for it." But Tara's trap was already sprung. 2 airport police officers stormed aboard, their boots pounding the aisle, their uniforms crisp with authority. One, a broad man with a buzz, cut, barked, "Passenger in 1B, step forward." The other, lean and stone-faced, gripped his cuffs, his badge catching the light. Evelyn rose, her cane tapping the floor, her purse clutched tight. But before Nathan could intervene, the officers seized her arms, their grips like iron. "You're under suspicion of assault and theft," the broad one growled, snapping cold, steel cuffs around her wrists, the metal digging deeper than the zip ties ever had. Evelyn's dignity buckled, her loafers scuffing the carpet as they dragged her forward, the crowd parting like a sea of vultures. Nathan lunged, shoving past Tara, his voice a snarl. "She's my mother, you idiots. Release her or you're finished." But the officers didn't flinch, their orders locked in by Tara's call, her smirk returning as she followed close behind. The jet bridge loomed ahead, cold and echoing, its walls amplifying the passengers' jeers as they spilled out behind her. "Lock her up!" the pinstripe man shouted, his glass raised in a toast. "She doesn't belong on planes." The silk, blouse woman added, her voice a venomous hiss. Evelyn stumbled, the cuffs cutting into her skin, her suit a sodden weight, but she kept her chin high, her silver curls a crown against the chaos. Outside, Gate C7 was a circus, travelers and staff gawking as the officers hauled Evelyn through the terminal, phones rising like a forest of eyes. Nathan trailed them, barking into his phone. "Get legal here now." His badge gleamed, his authority a shield, but Tara's lie had momentum, a wildfire he couldn't douse. She strutted beside the officers, her voice loud and theatrical. "She's been disruptive since boarding. Accusations, theft, refusing orders." The crowd swelled, their whispers turning to shouts, slurs slicing through the air. "Go back where you came from," a man in a trucker hat yelled, his fist raised. "Thieving trash," a woman with a stroller spat, her baby wailing in the din. Evelyn's knees trembled, the cuffs a brutal reminder of Tara's power. But she didn't falter. She'd marched through worse, faced dogs and hoses in the 60s, and this was just another gauntlet. Nathan's voice cut through the noise, a vow against the storm. "I'll bury you all for this." Tara grinned, unfazed, her heels clicking. A victory march as the officers shoved Evelyn toward a security room, the door slamming shut behind her. Inside, the air was stale, the walls gray, but Evelyn stood tall, her wrists bleeding, her mind racing. Nathan would free her, she thought, his power a hammer to smash Tara's lies. But Tara had one more card. She'd called her ex-cop uncle. Vince, a hulking man with a rap sheet buried by favors, and he was already on his way. She slipped her phone from her pocket, texting him as the crowd dispersed, her fingers quick and sure. "She's down, but her son's trouble. Leak the video." Vince's reply buzzed back, a promise of chaos. Evelyn sat in the holding room, her cane propped against the wall, her purse confiscated, believing Nathan's arrival was her salvation. She didn't know Tara's smirk hid a deeper plan, one that would turn her son's rescue into a fleeting gasp before the next blow. The terminal lights buzzed overhead, the rain tapping the windows, and Evelyn braced herself, unaware that the mob was just the beginning. The holding room at Portland International Airport's Gate C7 was a concrete box, its gray walls stained with years of neglect, the air heavy with the tang of disinfectant and despair. Evelyn Carter sat on a metal bench, her wrists bruised and sore from the cuffs now removed, her gray suit a sodden wreck clinging to her frame, the soda stains a dark map of Tara Hensley's cruelty. Her silver curls hung limp, her cane leaned against the wall, and her dark eyes stared at the locked door, a quiet fire burning behind them. The chaos of the terminal lingered in her ears, the mob's chants of thief and lock her up. A fresh wound, but she kept her breathing steady, her composure a shield honed over 72 years of battles. Nathan had stormed the gate, freed her from the zip ties, and now he'd get her out of this, she told herself, his CEO authority a lifeline she clung to in the dim light. The door clanked open and Nathan stepped in, his navy suit rumpled, his dark eyes blazing with fury. "Mom, you're out," he said, his voice low and fierce, extending a hand to help her up. "I pulled strings. They've got no evidence." Evelyn rose, her cane tapping the floor, her loafers scuffing the tiles as she gripped his arm, her purse returned but still heavy with the planted wallet's weight. "Thank you, son," she murmured, her tone calm but edged with exhaustion. The officers outside parted reluctantly, their boots shuffling, their faces blank as Nathan led her through the terminal, his badge flashing like a sword. The crowd had thinned, travelers drifting to baggage claim. But phones still glowed, recording every step, their lenses a silent jury. They reached the parking garage, the rain a steady drum against the concrete, and Nathan's black SUV gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Evelyn sank into the passenger seat, her joints aching, her wrists throbbing, believing the worst was behind her. "I'll sue them all," Nathan growled, starting the engine, his knuckles white on the wheel. "Tara, the airline, the police, they'll pay." Evelyn nodded, her silver curls catching the dashboard glow, her mind on the T. She'd sipped in first class, the fleeting victory Tara had crushed. "We'll fight this," she said, her voice steady, thinking Nathan's power would clear her name, restore her dignity. But outside, the world was already shifting. Tara had retreated to the crew lounge, her blonde bun loose, her uniform still, crisp, her hazel eyes glinting with a manic glee. She'd texted Vince, her ex-cop uncle, and he'd delivered. A fake video hit the internet as Evelyn left the holding room, a grainy clip Vince had doctored from a passenger's shaky footage, showing Evelyn lunging at Tara mid-flight, her arm outstretched in a frozen frame of aggression. It was a lie, a clever cut from the soda assault twisted into violence, and it spread like wildfire. "Violent granny attacks crew," screamed the headlines, popping up on screens across Portland, then nationwide, the clip looping on news sites and social media, racking up millions of views in hours. By the time Nathan pulled onto the highway, the smear was unstoppable. Protesters swarmed Horizon Airways headquarters downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, their signs jagged with hate. "Fire the thief," one read, scrawled in red marker. "No criminals in the sky," another blared, held by a woman with a megaphone, her voice a shrill echo against the building's facade. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her purse, a flood of alerts she didn't check. But Nathan's dashboard screen lit up with a news feed, the fake video playing in brutal silence. She assaulted a flight attendant, a reporter intoned, endangering passengers on Flight 217. Evelyn's stomach sank, her hands trembling as she clutched her cane, the lie a noose tightening around her legacy. Nathan slammed the wheel, the SUV swerving slightly. "This is bullshit," he snapped, his voice cracking with rage. "They've got nothing real, I'll bury them." But the protesters grew louder, their chants a roar as he turned toward Evelyn's suburban home, a modest brick house she'd bought with her professor's pension. The streets darkened, the rain thickening, and as they neared her cul-de-sac, headlights flared ahead. A dozen figures emerged, their faces shadowed, their signs dripping with wet ink. "Thief!" they shouted, hurling slurs through the storm. A brick sailed from the mob, smashing Evelyn's car window beside Nathan, glass shattering across the seat in a spray of shards. Evelyn flinched, her cane slipping to the floor, her breath catching as Nathan floored the gas, peeling away from the crowd. "Hold on, Mom," he yelled. Weaving through side streets, the protesters' screams fading into the rain. She pressed a hand to her chest, her suit damp with sweat now, the brick a brutal echo of Tara's venom. They reached a hotel, a nondescript tower near the airport, and Nathan rushed her inside, his arm around her shoulders, his phone already dialing legal. "We're safe here," he said, guiding her to a room on the 5th floor, the door locking. With a heavy click, Evelyn sank onto the bed, her wrists pulsing, her mind racing. She thought Nathan's power would crush this, that the mob was the last gasp of Tara's spite. But Tara wasn't finished. She sat in a downtown bar, her uniform, swapped for a black jacket, her blonde hair loose, a beer in hand as she watched the news on a wall-mounted TV. "She's a menace," she told a reporter earlier, her voice smooth and practiced, the interview now looping nationwide. "I had to protect the passengers." Her reinstatement papers sat on the bar, signed by a panicked Horizon board desperate to appease the public, her smirk a quiet victory. Vince had fueled the fire, the fake video his masterpiece, and Tara basked in it, believing Evelyn's name was ash, her son's authority a crumbling wall. Evelyn turned on the hotel TV, the screen flaring to life with her own face, twisted in that doctored lunge, the headlines a gut punch. "CEO's mother caught in violent chaos," one blared. "Airline in crisis," another screamed. "Stock," tickers showing Horizon shares dipping fast. Protesters outside the hotel chanted, their voices a dull roar through the window, signs waving like battle flags. "She's dragging us down," a board member's leaked email read, flashing. Across the screen, a betrayal Nathan hadn't seen coming. Evelyn's hands shook, her cane beside her, her legacy of civil rights lectures and quiet dignity shredded in real time. Nathan paced the room, his phone buzzing with calls he ignored, his voice a low growl. "They're folding, Mom, but I won't. We'll sue. Expose the video. End this." Evelyn nodded, her silver curls glinting in the lamplight, her resolve hardening. She'd faced smears before, seen her name dragged through mud by bigots and bureaucrats, and this was just another fight. But the board's threat loomed, a shadow she couldn't outrun, and Tara's reinstatement was a slap she felt in her bones. She thought Nathan's arrival had saved her, that his power would turn the tide, but the mob, the video, the brick, they were Tara's counterstrike, and the war was spiraling beyond her grasp. The rain tapped the window, a relentless beat, and Evelyn sat still, her suit a tattered armor, her wrists a map of pain. She'd survived the flight, the cuffs, the jeers, believing her son's hammer would smash Tara's lies. But Vince's video had flipped the board, turned the public, and Tara's smirk on the screen promised more. Evelyn's hope flickered, her mind on the hotel's thin walls, the protesters below, the brick's jagged edge. This wasn't the end, she knew, but the beginning of something darker, and Tara's next move was already in motion, a storm she couldn't yet see. The hotel room on the 5th floor of the Portland Airport Inn was a sterile cocoon, its beige walls closing in under the hum of a flickering fluorescent light, the rain a steady drum against the window pane. Evelyn Carter sat on the edge of the bed, her gray suit stiff with dried soda and sweat, her wrists bearing the faint scars of cuffs and zip ties, her silver curls tangled from the chaos of the past hours. Her cane rested against the nightstand, her purse beside her, and her dark eyes stared at the muted TV, where her face still looped in that doctored lunge. The headline, "Violent Granny Shames Airline," a knife twisting in her gut. The protesters, chants filtered through the glass, a dull roar of "Fire the thief" that shook her bones. But she kept her breathing even, her composure a fortress against the storm. Nathan had saved her from the holding room, she'd thought, his CEO power, a shield to end Tara Hensley's war, but the brick through her car window and the viral video had proven her wrong. Nathan paced the carpet, his navy suit wrinkled, his tie loosened, his dark eyes blazing with a fury he couldn't contain. His phone buzzed relentlessly, A chorus of alerts he silenced with a swipe, his voice a low growl. "I'm taking this. To the board tomorrow, Mom. We'll sue Tara, Vince, the whole damn company if we have to." Evelyn nodded, her hands folded in her lap, her loafers scuffing the floor. "We've got the truth, son," she said, her tone steady, the professor's calm cutting through his rage. "They can't bury us." She believed it, clung to it, her faith in Nathan's hammer a lifeline after the mob's assault. But the TV flickered, a new alert flashing. Horizon board calls emergency meeting, and her stomach tightened, a premonition she couldn't shake. Morning broke gray and heavy, the rain a curtain over Portland as Nathan drove Evelyn to Horizon Airways headquarters, a towering slab of glass piercing the skyline. The protesters had swelled, 100 strong now, their signs dripping with venom. "No criminals in charge," and "Clean house." They shouted slurs as Nathan's SUV pulled into the garage, their fists pounding the hood, a bottle shattering against the windshield in a spray of glass. Evelyn flinched, her cane slipping in her grip, but Nathan's hand steadied her. "Stay close, Mom," he said, his voice a vow, guiding her through a side entrance, past security guards who averted their eyes, their badges glinting in the dim light. The boardroom on the 38th floor was a sterile arena, its long, oak table flanked by 12 suits, their faces etched with unease under the glow of recessed lights. Nathan stood at the head, his badge pinned to his lapel, Evelyn beside him, her suit a tattered banner of her ordeal, her silver curls a quiet crown. The board stared, their silence a wall, until Victor, a gray-haired man with fogged glasses, cleared his throat. "Nathan, this is a disaster," he said, his voice clipped, gesturing to a tablet where the fake video played on mute. "Evelyn's assault, a damning loop. Stock's down 10%. She's killing us." A woman with a razor-sharp bun, Claire, leaned forward, her nails tapping the table. "Your mother's a liability. We're suspending you, effective now." Nathan's fist slammed the table, the oak trembling under his rage. "She's innocent, you cowards. That video's fake. Tara framed her, and you're folding to a mob." His voice cracked like thunder, but the board didn't flinch. Victor adjusted his glasses, his tone cold. "PR's a bloodbath. We've reinstated Tara to calm things down." Claire slid a folder across the table, its pages detailing fake complaints Tara had planted, claims Evelyn had harassed staff on flights years ago, lies typed in crisp black ink. "She's a pattern," Claire said, her lips a thin line. "You're out, Nathan, or we vote you gone." Evelyn's chest ached, the air sucked from the room, her cane a lifeline as she gripped it tight. She'd thought Nathan's power would crush Tara's lies, that his seat at the table was unassailable, but the board's betrayal was a blade she hadn't seen coming. Nathan turned to her, his eyes fierce. "We'll fight this, Mom. Lawsuits, press, everything." She nodded, her resolve hardening, but the TV in the corner flared to life, a live feed of Tara outside, her blonde hair loose, her black jacket sleek as she faced a crowd of reporters. "She's a menace," Tara said, her voice smooth, her reinstatement papers flashing in her hand. "I'm back to protect Horizon's passengers." The boardroom dissolved into murmurs, the suits shifting in their seats, their loyalty a crumbling. "Damn." Evelyn slipped out with Nathan, the elevator ride a silent descent. The protesters' chants a dull pulse through the walls. They reached her house, the brick facade still standing despite the mob's fury, and she sank into her armchair, the cushions a familiar embrace. The TV flickered on, news anchors dissecting her crimes, protesters burning her civil rights, textbooks in the street, their flames a pyre for her legacy. "They're torching my work," she whispered, her hands trembling, her suit a ruin against the fabric. Nathan knelt beside her, his voice a vow. "We'll sue, Mom. They've gone too far." She thought they'd hit bottom, that the board's coup was Tara's last strike, her reinstatement the final insult. But Vince wasn't done. Across town, in a dingy apartment thick with cigarette smoke, he hunched over a laptop, his hulking frame dwarfing the screen, his buzz cut catching the neon glow from a bar sign outside. He'd leaked the video, turned the public, and now he plotted worse, his fingers typing a message to a burner phone Tara kept hidden. "She's still breathing. Time to burn her out." His reply buzzed back, a promise of fire, and Evelyn's house loomed in his mind, a target she didn't see coming. Evelyn sat still, the TV's glare a harsh light on her silver curls, her cane beside her, her wrists a map of pain. She'd faced the flight, the mob, the smear, believing Nathan's fight would turn the tide, that the board's betrayal was the worst they could throw. But Tara's voice on the screen, her smug return, was a taunt she felt in her soul. And Vince's shadow was a storm she couldn't hear. The protesters' flames danced outside, her books turning to ash, and she gripped the armrests, her mind racing. "We'll fight," she echoed Nathan, her voice steel, but the air grew heavy, a premonition of smoke she didn't yet smell. Tara had won this round, and Vince's next move would make the boardroom look like mercy. The rain slowed to a drizzle, the night pressing against the windows, and Evelyn's house stood quiet, a fragile sanctuary she thought she'd reclaimed. Nathan paced the living room, his phone buzzing with legal calls, his tie discarded on the couch. "They'll regret this," he said, his eyes on her, his faith a rock she leaned on. But the TV looped Tara's interview, her smirk a promise of more, and Evelyn's hope flickered, her mind on the brick, the chance, the board's cold eyes. She'd survived the flight, the cuffs, the mob. But this was deeper, a war spiraling beyond her grasp, and Vince's fire was already kindling, a blaze she couldn't yet see. The night draped Portland in a shroud of damp shadows, the rain a faint whisper against the windows of Evelyn Carter's modest brick bungalow, its flower boxes wilting under the weight of the storm's aftermath. Inside, the living room glowed, with the soft flicker of a table lamp, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor where Evelyn sat in her armchair, her gray suit stiff with dried soda and sweat, her wrists a patchwork of bruises from cuffs and zip ties. Her silver curls framed her weary face, her cane rested against the cushion, and her dark eyes stared at the TV, now muted, where Tara Hensley's smug reinstatement interview looped, a taunt that gnawed at her soul. The protesters' chants had faded, their book-burning pyres extinguished by the drizzle, and Nathan had left her here after the boardroom coup, promising to return with legal firepower. She'd thought the hotel escape, the mob's retreat, meant safety, a chance to regroup. But the air felt thick, a warning she couldn't name. Evelyn rose, her loafers scuffing the floor, her joints creaking as she shuffled to the kitchen, the scent of lavender tea a faint comfort in her sanctuary. She'd returned from the hotel hours ago, Nathan's insistence on rest a command she'd obeyed, believing the worst was behind her, that Tara's boardroom victory and Vince's viral smear were the final blows. The kettle whistled, a sharp note cutting through the silence, and she poured steaming water into a chipped mug, her hand steady despite the tremor in her fingers. She'd faced the flight, the mob, the brick, the board's betrayal, and Nathan's fight was her anchor, his CEO power a shield she trusted to crush their lies. The tea warmed her palms, a small victory in a war she thought she'd survived. But outside, the night shifted. Headlights flared in the cul-de-sac, engines growling as 3 pickup trucks rolled to a stop, their tires crunching gravel, their beams slashing through her curtains. Vince, Tara's ex-cop uncle, stepped from the lead truck, his hulking frame a silhouette against the glare, his buzz cut glinting with raindrops, a Molotov cocktail dangling from his meaty hand. His crew, 5 men in hoodies and boots, spilled out behind him, their faces shadowed, their laughter a low rumble as they fanned across her lawn. Vince's eyes locked on the bungalow, his grin a jagged slash, his burner phone buzzing with Tara's last text. Burn her out. He'd turned the video into a weapon, flipped the board, and now he'd make Evelyn pay with fire. The first bottle sailed through the air, a comet of glass and flame crashing through Evelyn's front window, shattering the pane in a spray of shards. The curtains ignited, orange tongues licking up the fabric, smoke billowing thick and black as the roar of fire filled the house. Evelyn dropped her mug, the porcelain shattering on the tile, her gasp swallowed by the crackle of flames. She stumbled, back, her cane forgotten, her purse snatched from the counter as a second bottle hit the porch. the potted geraniums exploding into a bonfire, the heat a wall that drove her toward the hall. "Burn her out!" a voice bellowed, Vince's growl rising above the chaos, his crew cheering like wolves around a kill. "Finish her!" another shouted, a bottle smashing against the siding, the blaze spreading fast. Evelyn's lungs seized, smoke clawing at her throat as she staggered to her bedroom, the fire chasing her steps, melting photos and books she'd spent decades collecting. Her civil rights lectures, her life's work, curled into ash, the heat a beast snapping at her heels. She kicked open the back door, her bare feet hitting the wet grass, her pajamas clinging to her smoke-drenched skin as she fled into the night. The mob's cheers echoed behind her, the sky turning red with the glow of her burning home, Vince's silhouette a dark god against the inferno. She collapsed behind a neighbor's shed, coughing, trembling, her purse clutched tight, the only relic of her life left unburned. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late to save anything, and Nathan's SUV screeched into the alley, his headlights cutting through the haze. He bolted from the driver's seat, his navy suit streaked with ash, his voice hoarse as he shouted her name. "Mom, where are you?" Evelyn raised a hand, her silver curls wild, her eyes streaming from smoke as he found her, cradling her against his chest. "You're okay, I've got you," he whispered, his arms a fortress, the blaze lighting the night like a war zone. She nodded weakly, her throat raw, her mind spinning. She'd thought the board's coup was the end, that Tara's reinstatement was the final cut. But this was a death blow, her sanctuary torched by Vince's hand. Neighbors gawked from their porches, phones filming the destruction, their voices a chorus of blame. "She deserved it," a man in a bathrobe shouted, his words a dagger in the dark. "Trouble follows her kind," a woman added, her silhouette sharp against the flickering light. Evelyn's knees buckled, the grass cold beneath her, but Nathan pulled her to the SUV, slamming the door as the fire trucks rolled in, their hoses useless against the ruin. "They'll pay," he vowed, his knuckles white on the wheel, peeling away as the mob dispersed, Vince vanishing into the night, his laughter a ghost in the smoke. They reached a safe house, a drab motel 10 miles out, and Nathan helped Evelyn inside, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the carpet. She sank onto a cot, her pajamas stiff with soot, her purse a lifeline in her lap. "We'll rebuild," Nathan said, his voice a vow, his phone already dialing lawyers. Evelyn nodded, her resolve a faint ember, believing the fire was Tara's. Ash gasped that Nathan's fight would bury them now, but Vince had more planned. Across town, Tara sat in her bar stool, her black jacket rumpled, her beer warm as she watched the news, flames dancing on the screen. She texted Vince, her fingers quick. "She's alive. Frame her for it." Minutes later, police stormed the motel, their boots pounding the stairs, their flashlights slicing the dark. "Evelyn Carter," an officer barked, his badge glinting. "You're under arrest for arson." Nathan shot to his feet, his voice a roar. "She's the victim, you fools!" But the officer shrugged, cuffs dangling. Vince's planted evidence, a gas can with Evelyn's prints, slipped into her shed before the blaze, sealing her fate. Evelyn stood, her wrists offered, the metal snapping shut, her mind reeling. She'd escaped the fire, thought Nathan's arms were her salvation, but Tara's lie, Vince's torch, had turned her survival into a rap sheet, and the war was far from over. Hey folks, what's your take on this inferno? Comment 1 if you're screaming at Vince's ruthless arson, 2 if you think Evelyn's spirit can rise from these ashes. Ever seen justice burn this hard? Hit that like button if this twist has you on edge, and subscribe to see if Nathan can douse Tara's flames. Will Evelyn's arrest be the end of her fight, or is there a spark left to ignite her comeback? What's smoldering in Vince's next plan? The Portland County Jail loomed under a moonless sky, its concrete walls a gray fortress cutting through the drizzle, the air sharp with the scent of wet asphalt and rust. Inside, Evelyn Carter sat on a cot in a holding cell, her pajamas stiff, with soot from the arson that had devoured her home hours ago, her silver curls tangled and wild, her wrists raw from the cuffs snapped on at the motel. Her cane leaned against the bars, her purse confiscated, and her dark eyes stared at the flickering bulb overhead, a quiet fury simmering beneath her exhaustion. The police had stormed in, accusing her of torching her own bungalow based on Vince's planted gas can, a lie she couldn't disprove from this cage. Nathan had been shoved aside, his protests a roar in the motel parking lot. And now she was alone, believing his lawyers would free her soon, that the fire was Tara Hensley's last brutal strike. The cell block echoed with the clank of metal, and the low mutter of guards, their boots scuffing the floor as they passed her door. "Terrorist, Granny!" one shouted, his voice a gravelly taunt, his flashlight beam slicing through the bars to dance across her face. "Should have stayed off that plane," another sneered, his laughter a harsh bark that bounced off the walls. Evelyn didn't flinch, her breathing steady, her composure a shield forged in decades of facing down hate. She'd survived the flight, the mob, the fire. And this was just another gauntlet, she told herself, her faith in Nathan's power a rock she clung to. The guards' jeers were noise, not knives, and she waited, her bare feet cold against the concrete, her mind on the motel's brief safety now lost. But Vince wasn't done. Across town, in a dimly lit bar thick with stale beer and cigarette haze, he hunched over a table, his hulking frame dwarfing a burner phone, his buzz cut glinting under a neon sign. Tara's text burned in his mind. Frame her for it. And he delivered, planting the gas can, tipping the cops, but her survival gnawed at him. He dialed a contact, a wiry inmate named Rico locked in the same jail, his voice a low growl. "She's in there. Shank her. 50 grand when it's done." Rico's reply crackled back, a promise of blood, and Vince grinned, his meaty hand crushing an empty can, his plan a noose tightening around Evelyn's neck. Back in the cell block, the lights dimmed, a signal for lockdown, and footsteps approached, softer this time, deliberate. Rico slipped into view, a lean figure in an orange jumpsuit, his eyes darting like a rat's, a shiv glinting in his fist, its blade a jagged promise of pain. The guard at the end of the hall turned away, his whistle a faint tune, bought off by Vince's cash slipped through a handshake earlier. Rico rattled the bars, his voice a hiss. "You're done, old lady." Evelyn stood, her pajamas rustling, her cane a weapon she couldn't reach, her pulse hammering as he jimmied the lock, the metal groaning under his pressure. She backed against the wall, her bare feet slipping on the slick floor, her mind racing. "I've got no fight with you," she said, her tone calm, the professor's authority cutting through the tension. Rico smirked, the shiv twirling in his grip. "Ain't personal, just business." He lunged, the blade slashing toward her. Sighed, but Evelyn twisted, the steel grazing her ribs, a shallow cut blooming red through the fabric. She gasped, pain searing her flesh, but didn't scream, her hands clawing at the cot's frame as she stumbled back. Rico raised the shiv again, his eyes gleaming, when a shout echoed down the hall, sharp and commanding. "Drop it!" Nathan's lawyer, a wiry man in a pinstripe suit named Ellis, burst into the block, 2 guards trailing him, their batons drawn. Nathan had called him from the motel, his legal team scrambling as the arrest hit, and Ellis had stormed the jail, with a writ, his voice a whip cracking through the silence. Rico froze, the shiv clattering to the floor, his hands rising as the guard seized him, slamming him against the bars. "She attacked me," he yelled, his lie thin, but Ellis ignored, him rushing to Evelyn's side. "You're hurt," he said, his hands gentle as he helped her sit, her blood staining the cot, a thin line of fire along her ribs. The guards dragged Rico away, his curses fading into the dark, and Ellis pulled a phone, dialing Nathan. "She's alive, but it's bad. Get her to the ER." Minutes later, an ambulance screeched into the jail yard, its lights flashing through the bars, and medics rushed Evelyn out, her cane clutched tight, her pajamas a tattered flag of survival. Nathan met her at the hospital, his navy suit torn at the sleeve, his eyes red as he gripped her hand in the ER bay. "You're safe now, Mom," he whispered, the stretcher creaking beneath her, a nurse stitching the shallow wound with quick, steady hands. Evelyn nodded, her breath ragged, believing the jail's terror was the end, that Nathan's rescue had turned the tide. But Tara and Vince had more. Across town, Tara paced her apartment, her black jacket flung over a chair, her blonde hair wild, a TV blaring news of the jail attack. "She's still breathing," she muttered, texting Vince, her fingers trembling, with rage. "Make it worse." Vince, nursing a whiskey in his bar stool, grinned, dialing a nurse he knew at the ER, a woman with debts he owned. "She's there. Frame her again." Hours later, as Evelyn rested in a hospital bed, her wound bandaged, her cane beside her, the nurse slipped in, her scrubs crisp, her eyes darting. She planted a syringe in Evelyn's bag, then screamed, "She tried to stab me!" Her voice a theatrical wail that brought security running. Guards stormed the room, their boots pounding, their hands seizing Evelyn's arms, dragging her from the bed despite Nathan's roars. "She's injured, you bastards!" he shouted, shoving at them. But they didn't listen, their orders locked by the nurse's lie. "She's a threat," the nurse insisted, her finger pointing, the syringe gleaming in her grip. Evelyn's wrists snapped into cuffs again, the metal cold against her bandages, and they hauled her to solitary, a steel box in the jail's depths, the door slamming shut with a clang that echoed in her skull. Nathan's voice faded, his legal blocks crumbling under Vince's bribes, and Evelyn sank to the floor, her wound throbbing, her hope a fading ember. The cell was a tomb, its walls slick with damp, the air stale and suffocating. She'd escaped. The fire, survived the shiv, thought Nathan's arms were her haven. But Tara's venom, Vince's muscle, had turned her hospital bed into a trap. The TV in the guard station blared, Tara's photo leaking online, a staged shot of her fleeing Evelyn's attack, the riot outside swelling with her lie. Evelyn's legacy, her decades of teaching, her quiet dignity, drowned in a sea of hate she couldn't outrun. She gripped her cane, her mind a storm, believing Nathan would break through. But the cuffs, the cell, the planted syringe were Tara's checkmate, and the war was spiraling into a darkness she couldn't see. The solitary cell in Portland County Jail was a steel coffin, its walls slick with condensation, the air a stale chokehold that pressed against Evelyn Carter's lungs. She sat on the cold floor, her pajamas stiff with soot and dried blood, the shallow shiv wound on her ribs pulsing beneath a bandage, her silver curls matted against her scalp. Her wrists ached from the cuffs, her cane propped against the corner, and her dark eyes stared at the locked door, a quiet resolve burning through her exhaustion. The hospital had been a fleeting sanctuary, Nathan's rescue a glimmer of hope after the jail attack, but Tara Hensley's planted syringe and the nurse's lie had flipped it into this isolation, a trap she couldn't escape. She'd thought the fire, the shiv, were the end, that Nathan's lawyers would shatter Vince's frame-up. But the silence here was a new kind of terror, and she clung to her son's promise, a lifeline in the dark. Outside, Portland's streets churned with chaos, the drizzle turning to a steady rain that slicked the pavement, the jail's silhouette a gray monolith against the night sky. Tara's leaked photo, a staged shot of her fleeing Evelyn's attack in the ER, had gone viral, the image a match tossed into the city's dry rage. Protesters swelled into a mob, 100 strong now, their signs jagged with hate, "Hang the thug," and "No mercy for Granny." They surged toward the jail, their chants a thunderous roar, their fists clutching rocks and bottles, their faces twisted with a fury Vince had stoked from his barstool shadows. "She's a menace," a man in a soaked hoodie bellowed, hurling, a stone that cracked against the jail's brick facade, the sound a gunshot in the storm. Inside, Evelyn heard the rumble, a distant growl that seeped through the walls, her pulse quickening as the floor vibrated with the mob's approach. She stood, her bare feet slipping on the damp concrete, her cane a steadying hand as she pressed against the bars, her mind racing. She'd faced crowds before, marched through tear gas in her youth. But this was raw, personal, a beast Tara had unleashed. The guards' voices echoed down the hall, sharp with panic. "They're breaching the gate," one shouted, his radio crackling, but no one came for her, their focus on the riot outside, leaving her caged and forgotten. Across town, Nathan paced a safe house, a cramped apartment in Portland's outskirts, his navy suit torn, his dark eyes red with sleepless rage. His phone buzzed with Ellis's updates, the lawyer's voice a lifeline. "The mob's at the jail, Nathan. We've got a back exit. I'm moving her now." Nathan had been sidelined by Vince's bribes, his legal team scrambling, but Ellis had slipped through, a shadow in the chaos. Nathan grabbed his keys, his voice a vow. "I'm there in 10. He peeled out, the SUV's tires screaming against the wet road, the rain a blur as he raced toward his mother, believing he could snatch her from the jaws of Tara's revenge. Back at the jail, the mob smashed through the outer fence, metal buckling under their weight, rocks flying like hail, shattering windows in a spray of glass. "Get her out!" a woman with a megaphone screamed, her voice a shrill blade, her sign dripping with ink. "Justice for Tara!" Inside, Ellis reached the solitary block, his pinstripe suit soaked, his breath ragged as he flashed a writ at the lone guard. "Release her now," he barked, his hands trembling, the guard fumbling with keys as the chants grew louder, a tidal wave crashing closer. The door swung open, and Evelyn stepped out, her cane tapping, her pajamas a tattered banner, her wound a dull ache she ignored. Ellis gripped her arm, guiding her through the dim hall, the walls shaking as the mob's roars echoed inside. "Back exit, this way," he said, his voice urgent, dodging guards sprinting toward the breach. They reached a service door. The rain a cold slap as they burst into an alley, the jail's rear wall a shield against the chaos. But the mob had eyes, a splinter group circling the building, their flashlights cutting through the dark. A rock sailed from the shadows, cracking Evelyn's skull with a wet thud, blood trickling down her temple, a white-hot pain that buckled her knees. She stumbled, her cane slipping, but Ellis caught her, his shout lost in the storm. "Stay with me!" Nathan's SUV screeched into the alley, his headlights blinding the attackers, his horn a blast that scattered them like rats. He leaped out, his arms around Evelyn, lifting her into the passenger seat, her blood smearing his sleeve. "You're safe, Mom," he gasped, slamming the door. The mob screams a fading howl as he floored the gas, peeling away. The safe house loomed ahead, a drab motel room, and Nathan carried her inside, her cane clutched tight, her wound a throbbing pulse as he set her on a couch, a towel pressed to her head. "We're out," he said, his voice shaking, his phone dialing Ellis. "She's hit but alive. What's next?" Evelyn's vision swam, the pain a drumbeat in her skull, but she nodded, her resolve a faint ember. She'd escaped the cell, the fire, thought Nathan's rescue was her dawn. But the rock, the mob, were Tara's claws, and Vince wasn't finished. He sat in his bar, whiskey in hand, his buzz cut glinting, watching the riot on a TV feed, his grin a slash as he texted Tara. "She's out. Take her son." Tara, pacing her apartment, her blonde hair wild, her black jacket rumpled, smirked, dialing Vince. Kidnap him, make her break. Minutes later, Vince's crew snatched Nathan. From the safe house parking lot, a van screeching in, their fists a blur as they dragged him off, his phone clattering to the asphalt. Evelyn sat alone, the towel red with her blood, her cane beside her. The silence a new terror as her phone buzzed with a video call. Vince's face filled the screen. Nathan bound and gagged beside him, a gun to his temple, his dark eyes defiant, despite the bruises. "Go live, old lady," Vince growled, his voice gravel. "Retract everything or he's dead." Evelyn's heart plummeted, her wound forgotten, her mind a storm. She'd survived the jail, the riot, thought Nathan's arms were her shield. But Tara's venom, Vince's muscle, had turned her escape into a hostage crisis, and the war was a noose she couldn't slip. The motel room spun, the rain tapping, the window, and she gripped the phone, her voice a whisper. "I'll do it." She stumbled to a laptop, her bare feet leaving bloody prints, her pajamas a ruin as she set up a broadcast, believing a fake confession would save Nathan, that Tara's endgame was near. But Vince's grin on the screen, Tara's shadow behind. Him, promised more, a darkness she couldn't outrun. She'd face the flight, the fire, the cell, but this, her son's life, was a blade at her throat, and the mob's rocks were just the prelude to a reckoning she couldn't see. The motel room in Portland's outskirts was a dim cave, its walls stained with years of neglect, the rain a relentless tap against the cracked window, the air thick with the tang of blood and soot. Evelyn Carter slumped on a sagging couch, her pajamas a tattered shroud stiff with ash and dried crimson. the shallow shiv wound on her ribs, pulsing beneath a bandage, her silver curls wild and matted from the riot's chaos. Her cane rested beside her, her bare feet left bloody prints on the carpet, and her dark eyes stared at the laptop screen, where Vince's video call glowed. Nathan bound and gagged in a shadowy warehouse, a gun pressed to his temple, his navy suit torn, his face bruised but defiant. The rock to her skull throbbed, blood crusting her temple, but she'd survived the jail. The mob thought Nathan's rescue was her lifeline, only for Vince's crew to snatch him, turning her escape into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Vince's voice rasped through the speakers, a gravelly snarl that cut the silence. "Go live, old lady. Retract everything. Say you lied about Tara, or your boy's brains paint the wall." Nathan struggled, his muffled growl a plea she felt. In her bones, his dark eyes locking on hers through the grainy feed. Tara paced behind him, her blonde hair a tangled mess, her black jacket rumpled, a pistol in her trembling hand, her hazel eyes wild with a fury she couldn't leash. Evelyn's, heart hammered, her wound forgotten, her mind racing. She'd faced the flight, the fire, the riot, believed Nathan's power would end this, but Vince's gun, Tara's rage, were a noose around her son's neck, and she had no choice but to play their game. She fumbled with the laptop, her fingers, slick with sweat and blood, setting up a broadcast, her voice a whisper as she typed the link. "I'll do it," she said, her tone steady despite the quake in her chest, the professor's calm a mask she wore through decades of storms. The feed went live, her bandaged face filling half the screen, Nathan's peril the other, a split image of survival and doom. "This is Evelyn Carter," she began, her words slow, deliberate, stretching each syllable like a lifeline. "I accused Tara Hensley of framing me, burning my home. I was wrong." She swallowed hard, her eyes flicking. To Nathan, buying seconds, praying for a miracle, believing her fake confession would free him. Vince's sneer softened, his grip on the gun easing, but Tara exploded, her voice a shriek that echoed in the warehouse. "Louder! Say it like you mean it!" She lunged forward, yanking the pistol from Vince's belt, her hands shaking as she raised it, her face twisted with rage. "Say it's over or I shoot him now!" Evelyn's breath caught, her mask cracking, her voice rising. "It's over, please don't, I'm done!" She leaned into the mic, her words desperate, steel beneath the plea, stalling as the motel's silence pressed against her, her mind screaming for Nathan's team, for Ellis, for anyone to break through. In the warehouse, 6 shadowy men loomed behind Vince, their bats and knives glinting, their smirks a gallery of menace. Nathan rocked his chair, his bound fists crashing into Vince's legs, a sudden lunge that sent the gun skittering across the concrete. Vince stumbled, cursing, and Nathan slammed his shoulder into him, tipping the chair, the feed pixelating as the camera jerked. Evelyn gasped, her hands clutching the laptop, her whisper a prayer. "Come on, baby." But Tara spun, her pistol firing, the crack a thunderclap through the speakers, the bullet grazing Nathan's arm, blood blooming through his sleeve as he hit the floor, his gag muffling a roar. Evelyn screamed, the sound tearing from her throat, her wound flaring as she collapsed to one knee, clutching the couch, blood dripping from her temple onto the keys. "Nathan!" she cried, her eyes locked on the screen, the chaos a blur of fists and shouts. Vince wrestled Nathan down, his boot pinning him, the gun back in his hand, his grin a slash of triumph. "Keep talking," he barked, but Evelyn's feed flickered, a second stream cutting in, Jamal's face appearing. The young man from the flight, his braids swinging as he held his phone high, his voice a clarion call. "She's innocent. Look at this." Jamal's video flooded the broadcast, a crystal-clear clip from Flight 217, Tara dumping soda on Evelyn, her smirk undeniable, her taunts a venomous thread. "You're used to messes, right?" Tara's voice rang out, the passengers, laughter a chorus of hate, the truth a bomb in the digital ether. Evelyn's breath hitched, her cane slipping as she straightened, her mind reeling. She'd thought her confession was the end, that Nathan's blood was the price, but Jamal's move, unseen by Tara, flipped the game, a spark she hadn't dared hope for. Vince froze, his gun wavering, Tara's shriek a banshee wail as she spun toward the camera, her pistol trembling. "Turn it off," she yelled. But the stream surged, shares exploding online, the public's tide shifting as comments flooded in. "She's a liar." And justice for Evelyn. Nathan writhed under Vince's boot, his eyes fierce, a vow to fight even as blood pooled beneath him. Evelyn's voice cut through her feed, a desperate bid. "He's got my son, help us." She believed Jamal's video would save them, that the truth would break Tara's grip, but Vince's crew tightened, their bats raised, and the cops, bribed by Vince, raided a decoy site miles away, their sirens a useless wail. Tara lunged at the camera, her pistol smashing it, the warehouse feed cutting to black, but Jamal's stream held, the soda assault looping, Tara's face a mask of guilt the world couldn't unsee. Evelyn sat back, her wound afire, her hands shaking as she gripped the laptop, her broadcast a lifeline now flooded with support. She'd thought Nathan's rescue, her escape, were victories, but Vince's gun, Tara's shot, had turned it to ash, and the cop's failure was a gut punch. The motel room spun, the rain a dull beat, and she whispered, "Hold on, son," believing the video's reach would force a move, unaware that Jamal wasn't done. He stormed into the motel, his hoodie soaked, his phone still streaming, his brown eyes blazing as he burst through the door. "I've got the warehouse pinned," he said, his voice a rush, dropping beside her, his feed live to millions. "They're on 5th and Burnside. I tracked the signal." Evelyn's heart surged, her cane a steadying hand as she stood, her pajamas a ruin, her resolve a steel core. She'd survived the fire, the jail, the mob, thought Nathan's blood was the end, but Jamal's truth, his courage, were a lifeline she seized, and the war was teetering on a razor's edge she couldn't yet cross. The rain hammered the roof, the laptop's glow a beacon in the dark, and Evelyn's voice rasped through the feed, a vow to the world. "They've got my son, but they won't win." Vince's gun, Tara's rage loomed in her mind, a standoff she couldn't outrun, but Jamal's stream, the public's shift, were a crack in their armor, and she clung to it, believing Nathan's life hung on this moment, unaware that the final blow was hers to strike. The motel room in Portland's outskirts was a battlefield's aftermath, its air thick with the metallic tang of blood and the damp rot of rain-soaked carpet. The window a cracked portal to a dawn breaking gray and raw. Evelyn Carter stood beside the couch, her pajamas a tattered relic of soot and crimson, the shiv wound on her ribs a dull ache beneath a bandage, her silver curls wild and defiant against her bruised temple. Her cane gripped tight in one hand. The laptop glowed on the table, Jamal's stream still live, the soda assault video looping to millions. Tara Hensley's smirk a viral scar the world couldn't unsee. Nathan's bloodied face haunted her, the warehouse standoff a knife at her throat. But Jamal's signal trace, 5th and Burnside, burned in her mind, a beacon she'd seized after surviving the flight, the fire, the mob, believing her fake confession had bought time, only for Tara's shot to graze her son. Jamal knelt beside her, his hoodie dripping, his brown eyes fierce as he tapped his phone, the stream's numbers surging, comments flooding. "Save Nathan," and "Tara's done." He'd stormed in minutes ago, his voice a rush. "SWATs. Moving, I tipped them with the feed." Evelyn nodded, her bare feet steady despite the bloodstains, her resolve a steel spine forged through decades of war. She'd thought the riot, the jail, were the end. That Vince's gun would take Nathan, but Jamal's truth had flipped the tide, and she rasped into the mic, her voice a vow. "They've got my son, but they won't win." The world watched, her broadcast a rallying cry, her cane a scepter in the dark. Across town, the warehouse on 5th and Burnside was a crumbling shell, its rusted beams sagging under a leaking roof, the air sharp with gasoline and sweat. Nathan lay on the concrete, his navy suit torn, blood pooling from the graze on his arm, his wrists bound, his gag muffling a growl as Vince loomed over him, gun in hand, his buzz cut glinting in the dim light. Tara paced, her blonde hair a tangled snarl, her black jacket flapping, her pistol trembling as she shrieked at the shattered camera, her control slipping with every share of Jamal's video. "They're turning! She spat, her hazel eyes wild, Vince's crew shifting uneasily, their bats and knives lowered, doubt creeping into their smirks. Outside, tires screeched, sirens wailed, and SWAT burst through the walls, their black eye. Gear a storm of precision, flashlights slicing the gloom. "Drop it!" a voice roared, rifles snapping up, and Vince spun, his gun wavering. Tara's scream a banshee wail as she raised her pistol. Bullets cracked, a controlled burst, and Vince, crumpled, his weapon clattering, blood blooming across his chest. Tara froze, her gun slipping from her grip, her knees hitting the floor as cuffs snapped around her wrists, her cries a ragged sob swallowed by the chaos. Nathan rolled free, his bound hands clawing at the gag, his dark eyes blazing as a medic. Cut him loose, wrapping his arm, his voice a rasp. "Get my mom." Back at the motel, the laptop flared with a news feed. SWAT's raid live. Tara's arrest a headline exploding across screens. "Flight attendant caught in hostage plot." Evelyn sank to the couch, her cane slipping, her breath a shudder as Jamal gripped her shoulder, his phone still streaming, his voice a whisper. "They've got him." The door burst open, Nathan staggering in, his suit a ruin, his arm bandaged, his face bruised but alive. He dropped beside her, pulling her close, his whisper a vow. "You're safe now, Mom." She clung to him, her silver curls against his chest, her wound a faint echo believing the war was won, that Tara's fall was the end. Days later, Portland's skyline glowed under a rare sun. Horizon Airways headquarters, a glass tower rising from the chaos. Evelyn stepped into the boardroom on the 38th floor, her gray suit replaced with a sharp navy blazer, her cane tapping polished marble, her silver curls a crown of quiet power. Nathan stood beside her, his bruises faded, his badge pinned, proud, his voice booming as the board sat frozen. Their faces pale after Tara's arrest, Vince's death, the video's truth. "My mother's interim CEO effective now," he declared, his hand on her shoulder, the suits nodding. Their resignations, a stack on the table, their complicity a stain they couldn't scrub. Evelyn took the head chair, her loafers crossed, her purse beside her, a relic of the flight that started it all. She'd faced the soda, the fire, the jail, the mob. Thought Nathan's blood was her defeat, but Jamal's stream, SWAT's raid, had turned it to triumph. She spoke at a press conference, her voice steady, broadcast nationwide. "No one steals my seat again," she said, her dark eyes piercing the cameras, her cane a symbol of battles won. "This airline will stand for dignity, not hate." The crowd cheered, their signs now, "Justice for Evelyn," a tide she'd turned with her unbreakable will. In a jail cell across town, Tara slumped against the bars, her orange jumpsuit wrinkled, her blonde hair lank, a TV flickering with Evelyn's inauguration. "That was my job," she screamed, clawing at the steel, her voice breaking as the screen showed Evelyn at the desk, her tea steaming, her power undeniable. She'd torched Evelyn's life, shot at her son, thought she'd erased her, but the video, the raid, had flipped her trap into a ladder and Evelyn ruled the empire she'd tried to destroy. Vince's cell nearby was empty, his body cold, his cop ties severed, his crew dismantled, his legacy dust. Evelyn sat back, her navy blazer crisp, her hands steady as she sipped tea, the skyline red with sunset behind her. She'd survived the flight's humiliation, the fire's roar, the jail's blade, the mob's rocks, the gun's crack, each a step to this desk, this unexpected rise. Nathan stood proud, his suit pressed, his voice a whisper. "You did it, Mom." She smiled, faint and sharp, her eyes on the horizon. "We did it, son." But Tara's rant from her cell caught on a guard's phone leaked online, a final twist she hadn't seen coming. "I did it for him," Tara hissed, her eyes manic. "The exec who hated her kind, he promised me the top." The exec was Victor, the board's gray-haired coward, his fogged glasses a mask for the racist who'd pulled Tara's strings, his resignation a dodge that crumbled as the leak spread. Evelyn's tea paused at her lips, her gaze hardening, her voice a vow to Nathan. "One more fight." She'd turned a seat dispute into a throne, Tara's hate into her crown. And now Victor's shadow was a ghost she'd bury, her cane a scepter of power no one could steal again. Evelyn Carter's harrowing journey in this story reveals profound truths about resilience, justice, and the power of truth against systemic hate. First, it teaches us that courage isn't loud. It's the quiet strength to endure humiliation, fire, and betrayal, as Evelyn did from Tara Hensley's soda assault to Vince's arson. Her 72 years of fighting racism didn't bend under a flight attendant's cruelty or a mob's rocks, showing that inner grit can outlast any storm. Second, the tale underscores the danger of unchecked power, like Tara's petty tyranny, and the board's cowardice, proving that silence in the face of wrong fuels its growth. Nathan's unwavering support as CEO highlights a third lesson. Allies matter, but they must act, not just stand by. His legal battles and rescue attempts turned Evelyn's solo fight into a shared victory. The story also exposes the fragility of lies. Jamal's video, a single spark of evidence, toppled Tara's empire of deceit, reminding us that truth, though buried, can rise with relentless force. Finally, Evelyn's ascent to interim CEO teaches that justice isn't just survival, it's reclaiming what's stolen, turning a seat into a throne. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a battle won through scars, not magic. So what's the takeaway? Stand firm, speak out, and fight smart, because hate thrives in shadows, but resilience shines in the open. Now let's hear from you. What would you do if Tara crossed your path? Comment below with your thoughts, hit that like button if Evelyn's grit inspires you, and subscribe for more tales of triumph over tyranny. Share this with someone who needs to see justice rise. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. Here's to strength, truth, and a future where no one's seat is stolen again.